Welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts with hosts Margaret, Pickoff, and Sandy Feather.
Hello, welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast from Penn State Extension for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts. I'm one of your hosts, Margaret Pickoff. I'm a horticulture educator with Penn State Extension, and on each episode, I'll be joined by one of my colleagues on the green industry team as a co-host. On today's episode, my co-host is Sandy Feather. Hi, Sandy.
Hey, Margaret, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day here in Western Pennsylvania.
Oh, lovely. On today's episode, we'll be joined by Jenny Girard and Stephanie Leveling from the National Association of Landscape Professionals Women in Landscape Network. But before we get to our interview with Jenny and Stephanie, we'll start out with a little quick check-in about what your hosts are seeing or thinking about out in the field at this time of year, which is early April as of this recording. So Sandy, what are you seeing in the Pittsburgh area?
Well, my daffodils are blooming their heads off. I've got hyacinths taken off. Silver maples and red maples are blooming. Star magnolias, saucer magnolias are coming out. Although some of them we had such warm weather for us in February that they really started to push those flower buds. And for some reason, the star magnolias seem like they're okay, but the saucer magnolias look a little toasty.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I was worried that would happen out here in Philly because we also had some really, really warm stretches in the winter and very early buds on those magnolias. And there's so many gorgeous saucer magnolias in my neighborhood in West Philly, and I was just watching them with, so nervously because what happened last year is, they all bloomed and were glorious for about a day, and then we were hit with a really hard frost, and they just all turned brown, and it was. But they've been going strong for a couple weeks now, and we've really been enjoying them out here. Spring is totally here in southeastern PA as well. I got a chance to check out a demo orchard by the Philly Orchard Project. They have a lot of orchards around the city, and this one was in Fairmount Park, and just seeing some of these great orchard trees starting to bud, and some were blooming. Got to see what almond blossoms looked like, which are really beautiful. So enjoyed that. So spring is here.
We got flowering cherries are blooming. I just saw a really nice weeping flowering cherry yesterday, and I was like, wow. It is spring.
Yeah, such a good time of year for us plant people. We love it. All right, well, let's bring on our guests for today. Our guests are Jenny Girard, who is an area manager for RM Landscape in Buffalo, New York, and Stephanie Leveling, who is a client success and elevation team member at the Integra Group. And both of our guests today are part of the Women in Landscape Network through the National Association of Landscape Professionals. So that was a mouthful, but welcome onto our podcast, Jenny and Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Sure. So we always like to start out by just asking our guests to give a little background about who they are and what they do. And so maybe we'll start with Jenny and then go to Stephanie.
Awesome. So I've been in the green industry for a little over 10 years now. I can't believe time's just flown. I have my bachelor's degree in plant science. I went to SUNY Cobleskill. I did my internship at Longwood Gardens, and I then proceeded to move to Florida, and I worked for Busch Gardens. And then I decided to come home, from Florida, back to the cold of Buffalo, New York, of snow, land of snowflakes. And I joined RM Landscape. And I've kind of dabbled in everything there is in the green industry, from being a grower, horticulturalist, designer. I've done pretty much all of it. So that's just a little bit about me. Stephanie?
My name is Stephanie Leveling, and I've been in the industry for nearly 30 years. I went to Illinois State University and have a degree in agribusiness, the horticulture sequence. And I did my internship in the greenhouse industry with Hymos Greenhouses in the St. Louis area, and then decided I didn't care to be doing the same thing every day. It felt like Groundhog Day for me. So I wanted to get into the landscape industry. And so spent the majority of my time and tenure in account management. But the last 10 years, I was a division manager for a commercial maintenance company in St. Louis. And recently, as in the last year and a half, I left that part of the industry and started working for Boss Software. And so now I am a consultant for other businesses who use our product and help them with their business strategies and using software to help them with that, scaling their business.
Is that specific to landscape companies or?
No, it's more field related industries, service related industries, like the barge industry or food service.
Okay.
But the product that I work with specifically is for the green industry and snow industries.
Great.
Mhm.
Great.
Yeah, we were excited to talk to you guys for a number of reasons, but a lot of our guests so far have been, people who either work out in the field with plants, or manage landscapes, or manage other places where plants are growing.
Breed
And so
plants.
we and I think Sandy and I both have kind of a plant science background, and so we enjoy an opportunity to talk about the business side of the green industry as well, which is obviously very important. And I'm kind of curious, both of you do have background in the more hands-on plant management side of things, and kind of evolved into these more business focused, the business focused side of the green industry. And I wonder what that path was like for you guys, and why you made that decision, or feel like you wound up on that side of things.
Sure. When I went to school, my original intent was to be in finance. I wanted to be a stockbroker. I wanted to live in Chicago. It was my whole path. And your freshman year, Illinois State required you to take a general studies class. And so I chose horticulture, intro to hort. And I had never really had a job like working at McDonald's or anything like that. I had always mowed grass or planted flowers for little ladies who needed someone to help them with their landscape and stuff like that. And I always had money in my pocket. So I took this class and met some women in this class and really actually enjoyed it. And so when I took my econ final with 200 of my closest friends in an auditorium that I couldn't pronounce, didn't go so well in that final. And so I called my dad and I said, I didn't do so great on this, and but I feel like I want to change my major. And I told him about it, and he's like, well, can you make a living at this? I'm like, I think you can. Like, they just showed us all the ways. And it was still going to give me that business background, because that was required to do all like business administration type classes. So I switched my major and got a little bit of both worlds, being outside, working with plants and landscapes, and then also all the business acumen that I really wanted to have, which served me really well in my career, is to understand budgets and costs and things like that, and then be able to. I just wanted to help people solve problems, and sometimes the problems related to their budget and what they can get for their, the maximum they can get for their budget. And so that's the part that's really, you get to be creative, because you have to figure out how to really give them what they need at the same time within their budget. So I enjoy that part a lot.
And for me, transitioning from when I was in college, I originally was going to be like a head grower. I went in for production as my internship at Longwood. And I absolutely loved being a grower and working in the greenhouses. But what I ended up loving more was seeing the displays in the conservatory and seeing what it took to make Christmas happen, which I'll tell you is just absolutely amazing to watch and witness that just so much planning. And it really kind of tickled my fancy. I just never even thought about essentially event planning with plants, right? And so I saw this, I had worked a little bit with the baskets and smaller topiaries, and I saw this opportunity at Busch Gardens, and I was like, wait a minute, I can make a 20-foot tall plant statue that's living. And you're going to pay me to do this? Okay, awesome. Sign me up. When do I start? So that got me into like the creative side of growing and landscaping, which I would never have thought I was going to do. And then I got to deal with guests a lot more. And so that education portion of teaching people and watching that light of them enjoy plants or learn something new about plants and connecting them made me realize how much I loved landscape. And so that kind of just transitioned really fast into commercial landscaping and educating my customers about that. And, that's just the whole business side of educating them to do things the horticulturally correct way to prune this shrub. And it will save you this much money because we're not replacing your shrubs, and it's environmentally friendly because we're not, doing all these other things that you were doing in the previous. And so that whole education piece, I think for me, is what drove me to the business side of landscape.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think that's something that in part doing this podcast has kind of taught me is how many angles there are, or I guess how many opportunities there are in the green industry, and people can start out, planning to do one thing and then find that they, a lot of people say, I didn't want to talk to any of members of the public, or I didn't want to have that customer, contact all the time. But
that was my view in the beginning. I just wanted to be with the plants in the greenhouse, and I just wanted to be with them, and that was it. And it's completely changed.
Yeah, it is very rewarding to feel like you have taught somebody something meaningful and that they can derive joy from or save money from, or so it's interesting moment. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you see it come right over their faces, and they're like, oh, I understand now. Yeah. There you go.
Yep, that's one of the joys of this job, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, it's cool to get some background about what you guys are doing now and how you got there. And I'm wondering, what your connection is. Well, I'm wondering if you could tell us about the Women in Landscape Network, and also, what your connection to the network is, how you've kind of found your place there and how you feel it serves you and other women in this industry.
Yeah. Jenny, you want to start?
Yeah, I was just saying, so I had found the network through the National Landscape Association, and actually the owner of the company at RM Landscape was the president. So he was like, oh, you should connect with Jen Myers, and she's got a great group of network of people. And I was just kind of lost being the only female manager and doing field things at my company, right? You kind of have a tendency to feel a little alone. So this network brings thousands of women together that normally might feel alone. And they're also a great connection point to work through your problems, or, it could just be a day question of something that you ran into your landscape. You now have a network across the country that's going to help you, almost like an extension, right? To help you through these problems, whether it be management, landscape, design, plant material. I mean, you name it, you have this source of people. And then probably the best connection I made was Stephanie. I was looking for a mentor. I specifically wanted a woman mentor in landscape. And when I reached out to Jen, she said, well, you should speak to Stephanie. It was probably the best move I made. Stephanie has been amazing. I mean, 30 years experience. I don't think I could have asked for more for a mentor in the landscape industry. She's seen it all, especially being in the industry as long as she has, and to learn from what she's gone through or the challenges that she's faced and how she approached those situations. It's just helped me drive my career even further. So
yeah,
it's a great network.
And Jenny's one of the examples of people that I wanted to help. It is a feeling of isolation sometimes, that you don't know, because you are one of 1 or 2, maybe 5 females in an organization, and until we had virtual meetings, you had to go places to meet other women, right? If it wasn't in your industry, if it wasn't a regional thing and it was a national thing, you had to depend on your employer to let you go to those things, and those things cost money. I can remember up until the last place I was at, I was never invited to go to conferences. All the men would go. And it was mostly because it would be an extra expense, because I would have to have a room by myself, right? Mm-hmm. And so these guys would go, and you would never hear like of what they were learning or anything like that. They were always talking about all the partying they did and stuff and things like that. So I felt like I always missed out on these opportunities. And then once the Women in Landscape Network, when I learned about that, it was web connections. We were having webinars, and we were doing things via Zoom. And then of course COVID happened, and that was really kind of a pivotal thing. As horrible as COVID was, for the world, we were doing almost every other week some sort of virtual meeting on a topic, and it might be a topic that was broad and could be inclusive of anybody, or it could be a topic very exclusively to women, and it wasn't even recorded because people would be sharing. And I just remember meeting so many people, and I believe that's where Jenny and I met. We were both on a call, and people were sharing about how isolated they felt, and I could sit there and say, yeah, I know that feeling. I remember thinking, after I'd been married, we wanted to start a family. What was it going to mean for me? And, how was my employer going to react when I was going to need to take time off? And these women were sharing, like they weren't sure how to approach that. And so as the longer I got involved in it, the more and more I wanted to be helpful to help these women not fall into pitfalls that maybe I did, or be a voice for reason at a higher level to say, listen, there's a whole demographic of people that want to be in this industry. You have to make some accommodations if you want to grow your businesses and be inclusive. And I'm not just saying check a box. If you want more people to come into the industry and be people that can work for you, you have to accommodate that. So it's just been I tell everybody I drag my soapbox everywhere I go, because it's not that I want to, raise my hand and burn bras and things like that. That's not it. It's just there's so much that this industry offers, and there's so many women out there that truly do want to be part of it, and there is a place for them. And I feel like more and more people are realizing that, seeing the benefits of having women in their companies, and what they bring to the table. It filled my cup up, but it also has helped me embrace my age as not just being old, but being older and wiser with some experience, and what I can give back to others. So it ultimately comes back to that for me. So
I think another part of the network too is that it also provides a platform for other situations we have in our industry, and, you know, teaching about leading with empathy, leading your team to talk about mental health awareness. These are all different types of avenues that I've noticed that this network gives a platform to discuss those things. It also connects us with the Young Professionals Network. So the new generations coming into the industry have connections with all these people and all these different networks. The Women in Landscape is just a part of a bigger group of networks in the, you know, National Landscape Association. And for me, being part of the young professionals and then also being a woman in the landscape industry, it's like, you know, I have a source to not only just gather information, but to connect with people and bring my ideas to the table and actually be heard. It's tremendous to have that platform.
Yeah, it really is. So Stephanie, you mentioned helping young women in the industry avoid some of the pitfalls that you found yourself in. Do you share what some of those are?
Yeah, you know, to start with that, I remember getting my first job offer when I was a senior in college, and I remember our professor was Dr. Margaret. And I remember going into her office. I was super stoked because I'd gotten my offer over the weekend, and I had come in to tell her that I was going to work in a greenhouse operation as an assistant grower. And I remember her saying to me, "Well, I don't know why you want to do that. You know, women don't work in the field. You should be into research. That's what you need to be doing. You need to find your job there." And that stuck with me forever. And I mean, like, I put it on my shelf and closed the door, and I opened it up every so often as I continued to move through my career, because I didn't want anybody to set limits on anybody. And so if someone really truly wants to do something, well, then let's figure out a way. And everywhere along the line, it's been that way. You know, whether it's just not being taken seriously because, you know, you're a woman, you're, you know, account management, so just smile, be pretty, do what you need to do, you know, that kind of thing. Those are really, you do what you have to do, but I found myself almost defeminizing myself, you know, going along with the jokes, going along with stuff. Sometimes it is funny, but sometimes it's like, okay, guys, enough, you know.
Grow up.
Yeah, you know, and the older I got, the more that became a thing. But it was also just, you know, not speaking up because you were by yourself. And so you didn't want to draw attention to the fact that you were not appreciating their humor or their commentary and stuff like that. And so that ended up, when I look back, I wish I had spoke up, but then, you know, then you're disruptive and you're not, you know, going along with things, and you want to be part of the group, but then that just meant you were giving up a part of yourself. Having children seemed to be, you know, when I was young, you know, I didn't have my kids until I was 34. When my first one. And so I worked all the time. I mean, I did whatever I had to do. I'd work at all hours, whatever. And when I had children, the daycare would call, you know, you have somebody who has a fever, you have to go deal with that.
Yep.
And, or you can't drop kids off at a daycare until the daycare opens. And sometimes you have to be. And so my employer wasn't always accommodating to those things, and used it against me some point. And so it just, you know, you always had to work harder. You always had to prove yourself. And I just feel like, you know, as women, we shouldn't have to do more to show them our worth. You know, we should be able to do the same and be treated the same. And we have a long ways to go. But as it was mentioned in an email that we received, 40% of the women who attended the NCLC, or 40% were women. You know, as an industry, we represent 8%. So our numbers are going up, but we have a long ways to go as far as a whole. But it's exciting to see that 40% of the attendees were women. So that's pretty exciting.
That is
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah.
and I've been doing commercial horticulture since 2008, and I see more and more women at my meetings. I mean,
Mhm.
they're still a minority, but I am seeing more of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's always kind of a special moment when you do kind of lock eyes with the other woman in those meetings, and it's like, oh yeah, I see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's funny. It's like the only part of my life in which the line for the restroom and the women, for the women's restroom is like always so much smaller
Yeah.
than for the men. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
always like I've had women who attend our programs approach me and say like I'm so glad to see a woman doing teaching us these things, or
Mhm.
just see other women in this field, because it is pretty rare still, even if the numbers are growing. I always think
Yeah.
that's kind of a special moment when that happens.
Yeah.
I was
It's
looking a little bit on the website for the Women in Landscape Network to just try to get a better idea of what it is and kind of what it offers. And one of the blog posts was about what businesses can do to attract more women candidates and retain them. And a lot of them are fairly simple, like having uniforms in women's sizes and having tools that fit well for women's bodies and their height, and that aren't 500 pounds,
right.
but can do the same, do the same thing. And having access to bathrooms, like figuring out, if we have women and men on this crew, how will we make sure that everyone can use the facilities at some point? And Stephanie, you had mentioned, some schedule flexibility if a woman does have a family or is caring
Mhm.
for somebody. But those aren't really completely, that's not totally disrupting the industry.
No.
Those seem like fairly small changes to make that could make for a much more inclusive workplace, I would think.
Yeah. And the challenge we have is that workforce is a problem. So if, and this isn't just a recent problem, like what a lot of businesses are experiencing. Workforce for the industry, our green industry, has been going on for a very long time. And so people aren't just lining up and leaving their resumes behind anymore, and you get to choose. Now you're hopeful that they'll show up to an interview, or you're hopeful they'll show up to the first day of work. And so making those small accommodations, like the bathroom thing, it's a human being thing. It's not a woman or a man thing. And, I had a woman working on a crew. She was really good, and she came to work every day. She was a crew member. She just did her job. She didn't, she just took the machine, did what she had to do. And so we had GPS on the trucks and trailers, and for whatever reason, the owner happened to look at the GPS reports one day, and he's like, "This guy keeps stopping at the gas station, a couple times a day," and that's, that's you go to a gas station, you're gonna see a lot of landscape companies and other industry service industries. That's where everybody goes. But he was noticing that it was all the time, all the time, meaning every day at certain times of the day. And so I'm like, let me figure out what's going on there. Well, it happened to be that was the crew that had a woman on it. She needed to use the restroom. And so I mentioned, I brought it back to him, and he's like, oh, he goes, well, isn't there some other way we can do that without them having to do that? Go to the gas station. I'm like, well, what would you propose? It's like, this is she's a human being, and she's just plumb different than everybody else. Like, we have to make a small accommodation. It's not, their performance wasn't changing, their efficiencies weren't changing, everything was fine, except they had to make this accommodation. In the light of the fact that we don't have people lined up at our door to work for us, these are the things we're going to do. And so it's a challenge. And I think, if we just if we look at everybody the same, it's never going to work out. You have to look at people as, individuals and what their needs are, and the fact that, now we have to be a little bit more accommodating to be inclusive of all the individuals. So I don't know. anyway, Jenny could
No,
probably
no,
share
that's-
more with that.
That's huge. And Margaret, your comment about, appropriate size tools and stuff.
Mhm.
I worked for a big landscape contractor as a pesticide applicator. To have gloves that fit me
Yeah.
Mm,
was huge.
Mhm.
Just huge.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
know
Good.
that now there are companies that make outdoor apparels, specific to women's bodies, and to try on a pair of Carhartts that is made for a man and try to get it to work for,
Right.
as a woman, that's always been a challenge. And so, having something that actually fits, it helps you do your job better too. You feel more
For sure.
comfortable, and you're probably a lot safer when you have the right size gloves and you're applying pesticides. So
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
yeah, I feel fairly fortunate, coming into Extension at a time when, at least half of our team are women, and a lot of Extension agents now are women, but it hasn't always been the case. And it's
Mhm.
also, has historically been pretty male dominated. And so I wonder, for both Stephanie and Jenny, have you seen, you had mentioned that there's greater attendance of women at these conferences. Have you seen any other, positive changes over the course of your career as far as, women entering the industry, out of college or becoming interested, or any other changes you've sort of noticed?
Jenny, you want to answer that one first?
I think it's more not just a woman kind of answer. I've actually seen changes overall in the industry of the view of how women are treated. Just even in the 10 years, the conversation is actually happening. Whereas 10 years ago, it was more of a not relaxed, but it wasn't as loud as it is now. And I think it's all minorities. That conversation is becoming louder, and being recognized, and actually talked about with everyone, and how to come up with solutions. So the fact that there's a Women in Landscape network, right? That is a change, and that I've seen even in my short career. I've seen, companies, large companies, actually discuss on how do we actually make these changes and how do we make these accommodations, where 10 years ago that wasn't even a discussion, right? So I think that in itself is the biggest change, and having these companies recognize the women, but then, the newer, younger generations coming in are just expecting it. So it's no longer how can we make the change. You have to have the change now, because the younger generation expects the change. So I think that's a biggest change I've seen in the last few years, especially with my younger crew members that are coming in, and the way they talk and the way they bring conversation to different problems that I saw 10 years ago. That whole attitude has changed. So that's in my 10 years.
Yeah, I think, and Jenny said it best. I mean, when you look at the networks in the NLAP, they're all fantastic and well supported, but the Women in Landscape Network grew the fastest, and I believe is the largest. And it just told us how many women really truly wanted to, connect. And I'm also seeing a lot of, so I live in Illinois. The Illinois Landscape Contractors Association has a women's networking group, and they are really fantastic. They've started a mentorship, but that's primarily, that group is primarily in the Chicagoland area. So being from the St. Louis area, I've asked, hey, can we connect the rest of the state in other, in other areas? And when we talk to people, they're absolutely excited about it. They want that connection. They want that, to be able to talk to other women doing this. And so it is kind of a movement. Not radical, it's just, just wanting to be able to talk about things that you can't necessarily talk about at work with other men or employers, and just asking people, for help, on different things that they encounter. Like you mentioned, the clothing thing that comes up on the Facebook page a lot. Has anybody ever, does anybody have any recommendations for a pair of pants that fit, for the field, or that are comfortable and flexible, because it can be a safety issue. And so we're just trying to, but we didn't have these outlets, when I was in the field, and I'm grateful for it now. Not that I need that right now, but I'm grateful that the women coming in have these outlets and places to go when they've got questions or want to advance themselves, to help themselves in their career.
Do you think we're seeing more women owning landscape companies?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And to have some of the people that we have, like Jennifer Lemke and
Dooley.
Yeah, there's some women out there that are really doing great things. Pam Dooley is, she's leading from Georgia, and she was the Woman Entrepreneur of the Year last year, and she's so great, and she's a very down-to-earth person. That's one of the reasons I like her so much. And she'll share. Like, that's the cool thing about our industry is we share.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say we all mow grass the same way, but now we don't. Now we have autonomous mowers and things like that. So it is a little bit different, but we're all in it at the same level. We're all doing the same thing. We're all trying to survive. We're all trying to hire people, good people that will help us grow our businesses. And it's exciting to see women taking the opportunity and taking the chance, to just like a man would. It's
Right.
It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of hope and faith that you can get through it. Maybe a little bit of luck, but you've got to put the effort in. A lot of work. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. It's a lot of work, and there are a lot of women doing it. So it's pretty exciting. It's very exciting, actually.
And, I do think, when you said about, people are sharing, I even see that with the guys, like when I have some hands-on, like outdoor, we'll do landscape pest walks, for example. And, they get talking, well, I had this problem and I did X, Y, and Z. And well, I tried this and it worked pretty good, and I love getting that conversation going in my classes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's the neat. I think that's the coolest thing about the green industry is we're willing to share. There's a lot of peer groups out there. There's just, you sit at a round table at a conference and whatever the topic is, and you start talking about it. You get some great feedback and great information that you can take back to your organization and see if it works for you, or maybe it doesn't, or some sort of hybrid of, of whatever. It's just a really good opportunity to meet with other people doing really great things.
Yep.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that part of being a part of this network was you got to work with the Young Professionals Network, which is another NALP networking group. And I've heard a couple of snippets of little, podcasts and recordings that you guys have done with them, I think, before. But do you kind of, like, looking at that group, do you also see, I assume that there are a lot of women who are getting involved in a networking group like that, and maybe that's sort of like the platform that they start with. And I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking that for me, entering this industry, it would be really cool to see that, like, okay, I'm in this Young Professionals group, but there's also this entire network of just women that I could find a potential mentor, or I could ask questions that you wouldn't necessarily ask to a broader group. But yeah, I don't know where the question was in there, but it's cool that you guys are working with the Young Professionals, and I'm sure that that's helpful, for them to know that you're there as resources as well.
It is. It's actually Brett Lemke, who is the owner for RM Landscape. He helps run the Young Professionals. So, and he's on that podcast all the time. So he's constantly, I hear them constantly, like, bringing in the other networks, because there's also the Latino network, right? So we have all of these different groups, but we merge at conferences, and it's just, you see people from the Young Professionals mingling in with the women in landscape or the Latino network, or maybe they're in all three. So it's great to see that, because depending on what your question is or what your issue is, there's someone in that network of people that can help support you through that. And honestly, like going through my career, once I've kind of got into this network, I've never felt so supported other than maybe at college, right? You had your professors and you had your tight-knit groups to help support you through building up your degree and getting through that. But then you kind of get out the door and you're just, okay, what do I do now? Right. And that's where I've noticed that network is helpful, because you can't keep emailing your professors, because I'll tell you, after 5 years, they start to question. Because I still email some of my professors, just light questions. I usually start with the "how you doing?" But eventually you need a support group or a support network, and that's where the young professional kind of comes in handy, right? You're fresh out the door and you need that networking support, and I found it there. Then the Women in Landscape group, there are just some challenges, like Stephanie was talking about, still are happening today, that you need to know how to professionally handle that situation. How do I professionally handle maybe a customer not speaking to me, but my foreman, because they don't think I'm the manager? How do I approach that situation so that my customer still wants to speak to me tomorrow? These are things that, we go through, that we're still challenged with. And, having a connection like Stephanie, or going to the young professionals, having that source of knowledge helps you through those situations. So I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but
no, that's great. And obviously there's power in numbers, and I'm sure it's really, it makes you feel justified when you bring up a problem to a group and people have experienced something similar. You mentioning that, I'm sure that happens more often than we like to believe. A client speaking more towards your male colleague because they think that they're in charge or know more. I actually remember hearing a story about the opposite for an event that we did with Women in Horticulture, which is a local networking group here in the Delaware Valley, Philly area. And it was, one of their speakers was a woman arborist who had been in the industry for 40 years and was an incredible tree climber, and was telling us about her experience. And she said that their tree company found that the women homeowners really wanted to just talk to her and wouldn't talk to any of the male arborists, because they felt connection with her and trusted her judgment. And so hopefully it does go the other way sometimes, and not just the way you described, Jenny, but it's just another reason that there is value to having women on your crew as well.
It makes me think. I worked at a mom and pop garden center when I lived in Somerset County, and on the office door they had a sign, and it said, "Do you want to speak to the man in charge or the woman who knows what's going on?"
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I always had the issue with vendors. Vendors would always, I'd be standing around with my coworkers, and, they'd start talking to whoever and well, let me show you this. And he's like, I don't need to see it. And he's like, well, no, really. He goes, no, really, you need to be telling her, and I'm just like, hey, over here. Yeah. So it's, but it makes you aware. When you talk about it, when we continually talk about it, it makes you aware, like using words like crew member, crew leader. It just makes you more aware of it. And then when I hear certain things, I'm just like, yeah, don't use that word, use a different word, but it just, and it's not like it's a bad thing. It's just trying to change. Change is hard for a lot of people. And
absolutely.
It takes time, and it's going to take time. It's going to be a long time. So.
Well, this is such a an awesome topic, and this conversation has been really, really fun. And I feel like we could keep talking about this for for a long time. I think for today, it's about time to wrap up our conversation. And I just want to thank you, Jenny and Stephanie, for sharing your experience and some of your background, and what you're seeing out there now. And it's so great to hear that this network, which it just has allowed so many people to connect and feel supported. So
Yep.
we like to end our conversations on a personal note, and so we'd like to ask you both what you like to do outside of work. What do you most enjoy when you're not hard at work in the green industry?
For me, I enjoy volunteering. I work with a organization called Moms on a Mission, and that fills my cup. Or since I'm not in the green industry every day, I like to stroll around my yard like a little lady, looking at what's blooming or coming up in the garden, and then going inside and telling my husband all about it.
I love that.
Or my kids, whoever happens to be listening. So yeah, I actually really enjoy. I'm able to enjoy my yard and my garden now that I'm not doing it every day. So that's what I like.
So I'm in Buffalo. So when it's not blizzarding outside during the winter, I love to knit. So I am a big fan of knitting, or just cozying up in a corner and reading a book. During the summer, though, there's so many events. I love living in Buffalo just for that reason, because we have pretty much some kind of foodie thing or some kind of flower walk every weekend. So I love just getting out in my city and seeing it, and just doing things and being a part of it.
The Buffalo
Awesome.
Garden Walk is one of my most favorite things I have ever attended.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's an
Fabulous.
awesome
It really
time.
is.
Wow.
I don't envy you your winners.
Yeah. See, this is why we make it up for it during the summer. We
Absolutely. You have to.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's how I found living in Maine as well. The summers are, you just gotta, go all in, because it's limited. your time in the sunshine. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been really, really fun. Stephanie and Jenny, thanks for being on our show and sharing with us. It's been great.
Thanks for
Yes.
having
Thank
me.
you very much.
Thank you
All
for
right, take
having
care.
us. All right.